You can't just turn my pasture into a public picnic zone, Madison. I shouted, slamming my truck door so hard it rattled the window. 30 strangers stood under my oak trees roasting marshmallows like they'd booked my land through Airbnb. A toddler was playing with my mineral lick. Someone had even set up a volleyball net near the water valve I buried last spring. Madison visor so tight it looked like it was containing state secrets, grinned smugly and held up a clipboard like it was the Magna Carta. It's community land now, Cole. Deal with it. And just like that, as a cow lazily wandered past a kid grilling hot dogs beside my hay shed, I realized this wasn't a neighborly dispute. This was a full-on land invasion. I had only been gone 2 hours. 2 hours to drive into town for salt blocks and diesel, grab a burger at Henry's Grill, and head home. When I got back, my gate was swung open, my welcome sign was ripped down, and in its place was a hand-painted plank nailed to my fence, Willow Creek Community Picnic Grounds. The air reeked of sunscreen and charcoal. Lawn chairs littered my pasture. A portable speaker blasted Sweet Home Alabama. Folding tables sagged under crockpots and jugs of pink lemonade right on top of my irrigation line. It took my brain a full 10 seconds to process the absurdity before me. In the dead center of it all stood Madison Sloan. She'd lived in the subdivision 3 blocks down for maybe 8 months, but acted like she founded the county. She ran the HOA like a tiny authoritarian regime, dictating fence paint shades, mailbox heights, even holiday wreath styles. But my land? It wasn't part of her kingdom. I lived outside the HOA zone. Always had. My ranch had been in the Whitaker family for generations. Agricultural land. Legacy land. And it stayed that way. But that hadn't stopped Madison from accidentally including my pasture in HOA newsletters, community maps, and even a supposed beautification project budget. I'd always ignored her antics. Until now. I marched through the chaos, weaving between picnic blankets and extension cords, didn't even ask what they were plugged into, and stopped right in front of her. She was passing out glossy flyers that had the HOA logo and a heading that read, "New Community Picnic Initiative launches today." Near the bottom, in Comic Sans font, it said, "With support from local landowners and the spirit of community generosity." I grabbed a flyer and stared at her. "I never gave you permission. This is my land." She didn't blink. "Cole, the HOA voted unanimously to designate this field as the neighborhood's green recreation space. There's a clause in the township usage guidelines about unoccupied fields being temporarily accessible for community engagement." "You mean squatting?" I snapped. "It's not unoccupied. It's a cattle pasture. That's what makes it rustic." She smiled like she was doing me a favor. People love the authentic experience. Behind her, a couple teens were roasting marshmallows a foot from my hay shed, and a toddler was bouncing on a mini trampoline right above my water valve. "You can't do this," I muttered, less out of fear and more from sheer disbelief. She'd crossed a line. And I wasn't going to scream or threaten. Madison expected that. No, I was going to let her trap herself. And then I'd make sure the consequences landed like a ton of bricks. I walked to the rear pasture gate and opened it. Buttercup and Diesel, me 2 bulls, stood nearby. Buttercup was old, steady, and smart. Diesel was younger, meaner, and had the temperament of a caffeinated rhino. I slipped them some sweet feed and whispered, "We might have some work for you boys real soon." Then I went up to the porch, cracked open a soda, and sat on the swing like a man waiting for a show to start. Madison wanted a community event? She was about to get one. The next morning, I woke before sunrise. Coffee in one hand, binoculars in the other. The field looked quiet for now, but I knew better. Madison had posted flyers all over the neighborhood bulletin. It wasn't just a barbecue anymore. She called it the Willow Creek Family Day Festival. There were scheduled events, face painting, lawn games, a bounce house, and Evan help us karaoke. By 10 a.m., the HOA brigade arrived with folding chairs, tents, extension cords, and signs that read "Nature belongs to everyone." I watched Madison strut around in a new shirt that read HOA, helping our area. I nearly spit my coffee. They set up buffet tables directly over my irrigation lines again. Madison even made a speech about unity using a mic she didn't need, while people clapped and grilled hot dogs on my soil. That was my cue. I opened the pasture gate. Buttercup trotted out like a celebrity entering a stadium. Diesel, tail flicking, followed fast behind. Behind them came the rescues to 100 head of cattle, moving slow at first, but determined. I'd laid a trail of cracked corn and buckets of molasses blend near the buffet. The smell alone was like catnip for cows. At 12:17 p.m. they hit the food tables. Pandemonium. Buttercup bulldozed the fruit salad table. A group of moms screamed as a cow inhaled an entire watermelon. Diesel tore through a row of coolers like they were wrapping paper. One particularly daring cow licked a toddler's popsicle clean off the stick. Madison shouted into her mic, "Everyone remain calm." Someone screamed, "A cow's in the bounce house." It deflated like a sad balloon, taking 4 kids down with it. Diesel climbed into a folding chair and looked incredibly proud. Another cow licked a man's bald head, then stole his sandwich. People shouted at me for help. I just raised my lemonade and waved from the porch. "This is a working ranch," I called out. "You're trespassing. The cows live here. Y'all don't." Madison stormed toward me, covered in barbecue sauce, hair frazzled, stepping right into a pile of cow manure. She pointed a greasy finger at me. "You did this on purpose." "Nope," I said. "I just opened a gate." She started shrieking about lawsuits, the police, and animal control. Right on cue, a white news van pulled up at the end of the road. A reporter in heels unsuited for grass narrated into a camera, "We're live at a suburban barbecue gone completely off the rails. Sources confirm the land was never actually designated as community space." Madison tried to charm the camera crew, but I stepped up with my land deed and zoning maps in hand. Registered ranch property. Zoned agricultural. No permits. No consent. Just a bunch of trespassers feeding my cows marshmallows. That evening, the video of Madison covered in manure screaming at a cow named Buttercup went viral. Even the part where a cow licked the camera lens made it into the nightly news. But Madison wasn't done. The next day, I received a cease and desist letter, HOA letterhead full of dramatic legalese, accusing me of cow-based intimidation and requesting monetary compensation for her emotional trauma. I laughed so hard I had to sit down. Then came the community garden volunteers. 3 people in neon vests arrived to mark my east fence with spray paint, claiming Madison had granted permission for a green corridor project. I filmed the entire thing. "Y'all are trespassing," I told them. "And I've got your garden stake labeled Tomato Zone 1 on camera." They left fast. Madison's SUV peeled out from a few houses down when I waved at her. That night, I dug through old county records. I found the Holy Grail, a 1954 document from the town's founder declaring my land exempt from rezoning unless through direct municipal vote. It had never been digitized. I made copies, printed enlargements, and slid them into a folder labeled "In Case of Madison." A few days later, I caught her on my trail cam. Black clothes, flashlight, spray paint. She stenciled "Community garden starts here" on my fence before my floodlights activated. She ran like a guilty teenager. I emailed the footage to the HOA board with the subject, "Your president has a green thumb for trespassing." I was invited to speak to a zoning officer. I brought every document, every photo, every clip. The officer, an older guy named Harold, shook his head halfway through. "This woman's delusional," he muttered. "We'll issue a formal statement protecting your land's boundaries." Madison, of course, doubled down, claimed the footage was fake, the mud trench a trap, and that I'd weaponized livestock. She called me a terrorist, a barnyard terrorist, to be specific. But it backfired. The HOA board voted to suspend her. They issued an official apology and acknowledged my land was never part of the HOA. They even promised to revise their bylaws. But I had one more move. The next weekend, I invited the mayor, the town council, and everyone who'd ever bought eggs from me to Friends of Farmers Day. No drama, just community. And at the edge of the pasture where it all began, I unveiled a statue. 2 bulls cast in metal side by side. At the base, to all who thought they could take what wasn't theirs, the land remembers. Madison stood in the crowd, hair dyed, glasses dark, trying to disappear. I tipped my hat. She turned and left. I haven't seen her since. No more flyers. No more clipboard parades. My land was mine again, respected, quiet, and finally free of interference. Kids still tell stories about the Great Cow Uprising. A diner downtown sells Karen's barbecue surprise served with a side of ranch and a toy cow. Someone even made shirts, "I survived the mud march." I own all 5 colors. So if another Madison ever shows up, let her come. The bowls are ready.